Intelligence isn't what you think it is. It's not your degree, not your IQ, not how fast you answer questions. Real intelligence is the ability to see what others refuse to see. And the men who see clearly, they rarely belong. Because once you see how things actually work, you can't pretend you don't. And pretending is the price of fitting in. Let me show you what actually defines an intelligent man and why his intelligence creates the solitude he lives in. This channel is for the man who stayed strong when no one noticed, the man who carried responsibility quietly and slowly disappeared. Here, strength is questioned, silence is exposed, and the cost of being the strong one is finally spoken out loud. Intelligence isn't about being smart, it's about seeing clearly, and clear seeing changes everything. An intelligent man sees patterns where others see randomness, not because he's trying to, because he can't not see them. He watches people interact and sees the unspoken dynamics underneath the words. He observes systems and sees how they actually function versus how they claim to function. He listens to explanations and hears what's being avoided more clearly than what's being said. This pattern recognition isn't optional. His brain doesn't turn off. And that constant processing, that inability to stop seeing connections, that's what creates his solitary world. Because most people don't want patterns pointed out. They want to believe the surface explanation. They want to accept things at face value. They want to live in comfortable ignorance. But he can't do that. He sees too much. And seeing too much makes socializing exhausting. An intelligent man asks questions that make people uncomfortable, not to be difficult, but because the questions are obvious to him and he can't understand why they're not obvious to everyone else. Why do we do it this way? What problem is this actually solving? Who benefits from this system? What are we pretending not to see? And people don't like these questions, because these questions expose the fact that most people are operating on autopilot. Following scripts they never examined, accepting systems they never questioned, believing narratives they never verified. The intelligent man's questions aren't attacks. They're genuine curiosity, but they feel like attacks to people who've never questioned anything. And that discomfort pushes people away. So he learns to stop asking. Not because he stops wondering, but because he realizes his questions create distance. And creating distance gets lonely. An intelligent man thinks in systems and long-term consequences. Most people think in immediate cause and effect. Do this, get that. Simple, linear, predictable. But he sees the ripple effects. The second order, consequences, the unintended outcomes. He sees how the solution to one problem creates 3 new problems. How the quick fix now creates massive issues later. How the popular policy sounds good but breaks everything it touches. And when he tries to explain this, people don't want to hear it. Because long-term thinking requires sacrificing short-term comfort. And most people won't do that. So they call him negative, pessimistic, overthinking. When really he's just thinking. And thinking reveals uncomfortable truths. This is why intelligent men often seem distant. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're exhausted from watching people make predictable mistakes they could have avoided if they'd just thought it through. The intelligent man lives in a solitary world not by choice initially, but by consequence. He tried to connect. He went to the gatherings. He attempted the conversations. He sat through the discussions about topics that bored him. He pretended to care about things that felt meaningless. But every interaction drained him, because he was managing 2 realities simultaneously. The surface reality everyone else was operating in, and the underlying reality he couldn't stop seeing. Surface reality is simple. People say what they mean. Systems work as intended. Explanations are complete. Everything is exactly as it appears. But underlying reality is complex. People say one thing and mean another. Systems serve hidden purposes. Explanations leave out the most important parts. Nothing is as it appears, and the intelligent man sees both, always. And switching between them is exhausting. So he started spending more time alone. Not because he hates people, But because being alone meant he could drop the performance, he didn't have to pretend the emperor was wearing clothes. He didn't have to act like the obvious wasn't obvious. He didn't have to manage the cognitive dissonance of participating in collective delusion. In solitude, he could just think, clearly, deeply, without having to translate his thoughts into language that wouldn't threaten people's comfortable beliefs. And that solitude became his refuge. The place where his intelligence wasn't a burden. The place where he didn't have to dumb himself down to fit in. The place where he could be himself completely. But here's what defines the truly intelligent man in his solitary world. He doesn't become bitter. Lesser intelligence becomes resentful. It looks at the world and says everyone else is stupid. It develops superiority. It looks down on people who don't see what it sees. It becomes arrogant and isolated and angry. But real intelligence develops compassion. The intelligent man understands that most people aren't choosing ignorance maliciously. They're just operating with the tools they have. They weren't taught to think critically. They weren't shown how to question systems. They weren't given permission to see beneath the surface, so he doesn't hate them. He understands them. And that understanding, that compassion for people operating at different levels of awareness, that's what separates real intelligence from mere cleverness. The intelligent man in his solitary world reads constantly, not to accumulate facts, but to understand different perspectives, to test his thinking against the greatest minds in history, to refine his understanding of reality. His bookshelf isn't decoration, it's conversation partners, dead philosophers who ask the same questions he's asking, scientists who saw the same patterns he's seeing, writers who articulated the same truths he's discovering. In books, he finds the depth of conversation unavailable in most social interaction. And that depth feeds him in ways small talk never could. The intelligent man in his solitary world creates. He has to, because the thoughts in his head need expression, and most people can't receive them verbally. So he writes or builds or codes or composes or paints. Creation is how he processes the constant influx of patterns and connections and insights. It's how he makes sense of what he sees. It's how he contributes value to a world that doesn't understand him, but benefits from his output anyway. And in creation, he finds purpose, not the purpose society prescribed, but the purpose that emerges from his unique way of seeing. And that self-generated purpose sustains him in ways external validation never could. Let me show you what actually defines an intelligent man in his solitary world. First marker. He's comfortable with uncertainty. Most people need answers. They need to know. They need certainty. They'd rather have a wrong answer than no answer because uncertainty is uncomfortable. But the intelligent man is comfortable in the unknown. He can hold multiple, contradictory ideas simultaneously. He can say I don't know without shame. He can live in the question without needing to force an answer, because he understands that reality is complex, and complex reality doesn't fit into simple answers. And pretending it does just creates false certainty, and false certainty is more dangerous than honest uncertainty. Second marker. He changes his mind when evidence changes. Most people form opinions and defend them forever. Their ego becomes attached to being right. So they ignore evidence that contradicts their position. They double down. They rationalize. They protect their beliefs even when their beliefs are wrong. But the intelligent man holds his beliefs loosely. He's not attached to being right. He's attached to being accurate. So when new evidence emerges, he updates his understanding. He changes his mind. And he doesn't see that as weakness. He sees it as intellectual honesty. Third marker. He's more interested in understanding than winning. In conversations, most people are waiting for their turn to talk. They're not listening to understand. They're listening to respond. They're building their counter-argument while the other person is still speaking. But the intelligent man listens to understand. He asks clarifying questions. He tries to see the world from the other perspective. He's genuinely curious about how someone arrived at a different conclusion. not because he's going to adopt their view, but because understanding different perspectives refines his own thinking, and that refinement is more valuable than winning an argument. Fourth marker. He recognizes his own ignorance. The more intelligent a man becomes, the more he realizes how little he knows. The universe is vast, knowledge is infinite, and his comprehension, no matter how deep, is still a fraction of what exists to be understood. So he approaches the world with intellectual humility. Not false modesty, but genuine recognition that he could be wrong about almost anything. And that recognition keeps him curious, keeps him learning, keeps him growing. Lesser minds think they know everything. Real intelligence knows it knows almost nothing. Fifth marker. He can explain complex ideas simply. Intelligence isn't about using big words or complicated jargon. That's insecurity masquerading as intelligence. Real intelligence can take complex concepts and explain them in ways anyone can understand, because if you truly understand something, you can make it accessible. If you can only explain it in complicated language, you probably don't understand it as deeply as you think you do. The intelligent man in his solitary world has mastered the art of translation between complex and simple, between technical and accessible, between depth and clarity. Sixth marker. He's selective with his energy. He knows his attention is limited. His cognitive resources are finite. So he's extremely careful about what he engages with. He doesn't argue with everyone. He doesn't try to convince people who aren't ready to hear. He doesn't waste energy on battles that don't matter. He doesn't engage with every stupid thing someone says on the internet. He chooses his battles strategically. And most of the time, the strategic choice is silence. Not because he can't respond, but because responding would cost more than it's worth. Seventh marker. He's built an internal world richer than his external one. While most people need external stimulation constantly, the intelligent man has an inner life that sustains him. His thoughts are interesting to him. His ideas keep him company. His imagination creates worlds. His internal dialogue is engaging enough that external noise becomes optional rather than necessary. This is why solitude doesn't break him. His internal world is so rich that being alone with it is actually pleasurable. He's never bored, because there's always something to think about, always a problem to solve in his mind, always a connection to make, always a question to explore. The intelligent man in his solitary world pays a price. Let's be honest about that. He pays in connection. Most people can't relate to the way he thinks, so deep friendship is rare. Real understanding is rarer. Being truly seen is nearly impossible. He pays in belonging. He'll never fit into most groups, because most groups require conformity to collective thinking, and he can't unsee what he sees. So he stands outside, always observing, rarely participating fully. He pays in simplicity. His life could be easier if he just accepted the surface explanations, if he stopped questioning, if he went along with the program. But he can't. So his life is more complex, more difficult, more isolated. But here's what most people miss. For all that it costs, intelligence also gives. It gives clarity. He's not confused about why things happen. He sees cause and effect. He understands systems. He recognizes patterns. And that clarity, that understanding, that's a gift most people never access. It gives purpose. Not the purpose society sells, but the purpose that comes from contributing something only he can contribute, from seeing what others can't see, from creating what only his unique perspective can create. It gives freedom. Freedom from needing external validation. Freedom from following the crowd. Freedom from believing comfortable lies. He's free in a way most people never experience because he's not controlled by collective opinion. It gives depth. His life isn't shallow. It's not about surface pleasures and momentary distractions. It's about meaning, about truth, about understanding. And that depth, that richness of inner experience, that's worth the solitude. The truly intelligent man doesn't wish he was different, not anymore. He tried that. He tried being less. He tried fitting in. He tried dumbing himself down. And it was miserable. So he accepts what he is. Not with arrogance, not with superiority, but with honest self-acceptance. This is how his mind works. This is how he sees the world. This is the solitude that comes with that seeing, and he's made peace with it. He's found the few people who can meet him at his depth. Not many, but enough. One or two connections that are real beat 100. Connections that are performance. He's built a life that honors his intelligence instead of hiding it. Work that challenges him. Projects that engage him. Questions that fascinate him. A structure that supports who he actually is instead of who society wanted him to be. He's claimed his solitary world as sacred space. Not exile, not punishment, but sanctuary. The place where he can think freely, create authentically, be completely himself without apology. What defines an intelligent man in his solitary world? It's not his IQ. It's not his degrees. It's not what he knows. It's his relationship with truth, his willingness to see clearly even when clarity is uncomfortable, his commitment to thinking deeply even when depth isolates, his courage to stand alone rather than pretend to fit in. It's his comfort with uncertainty, his willingness to change, his mind, his interest in understanding over winning, his recognition of his own ignorance, his ability to explain complexity simply, his selectivity with his energy, his rich internal world. And yes, it's his solitude, not loneliness. Solitude, the chosen separation from collective thinking, the deliberate distance from surface interaction, the sacred space where his intelligence can breathe. The intelligence